to open with a public meeting. Newport City Council, Monday, February 7th, and also will be February 28th. The public hearing is held at 6:30 p.m. here in the City Council room. The information hearing is regarding the proposal to finance the acquisition of a new fire truck. And I can never say that word, sorry. Thank you. It's one of those things I can never, for some reason. In the amount not to exceed $800,000 to be voted on at the annual town meeting. And this first public hearing is on Monday, February 7th, 2022. I have a schematic of the proposed vehicle up on the screen, and I'd like the fire chief to give a brief overview.
Good evening, everyone, and continuation of where we were the last time. That is the latest rendition of the vehicle in question, and is from basically two vendors. It's a company called Rev. They own actually 5 different manufacturers, and it could go with either one of 2 brand names. But this is the specs that latest rendition that we have. It is a Class A frontline pumper. It's a 10-wheeler. It's going to carry 2,500 gallons of water. It has all the features of every one of the Class A pumpers that we have in the building. It is to move along, as you know, as we spoke at the last time I was here. We replace our Class A pumper, our frontline pumper, every 10 years so that we can maintain our fantastic ISO rating in the city. Our frontline pumper right now is a 2011, so it's time to be replaced. The only difference is we're upscaling it to be able to carry more water. In a nutshell, that's it. We basically spec this truck out to meet the future needs of the city. We've had a committee of 5 people working since last July with varying degrees of expertise, from trucks to fire service to the DOT safety officer for the state has been involved. We've got literally hundreds of hours of thought going into this. This is actually the 3rd rendition. We started with the gold standard of everything we thought we could possibly want or need in the next 30 years, and we've dwindled it down to what we need to best do the job for the next, we'll have this truck 30 years.
Great. Questions from anyone regarding the proposed purchase of this fire vehicle?
Mr. Mayor, is the city fire department going to ask for assistance from any other towns? I know you cover Coventry. I don't know if you cover any other towns as a first responder or not.
We are the first due fire department for the town of Coventry. They have, we bill them. We have a contract with them, and they're responsible for relieving, correct me if I'm wrong, 10% of our capital expenditures. So they'll be on the hook for 10% of this vehicle.
Does Coventry have a say, Mr. Mayor? Does Coventry have a say in this, or do you just say this is what it is, and
This is-
it is what it is, it is what it is, or
Correct.
are you going to get rid of any of the other apparatus?
No, actually, because of the age of our, we call our engine 1, it's a 1998, and it's in excellent repair, and the resale or trade-in value is so small that it makes more sense to keep it as a backup pumper. And again, to have to do with our ISO rating, having a backup pumper helps lower our rating. Also, departments all around the country are keeping one or two, depending on the size of the community, old vehicles to use at accident scenes, so that the last truck in line is an older vehicle, so that if you have a distracted driver pile into the last truck in line, they're not taking out an $800,000 truck.
But it can be used as a backup as well, is that right? Or
Absolutely.
if there's 2 calls at the same time.
Absolutely, or if we get into a situation where we have to run a long hose relay, if we got to put, say 3,000 feet of hose on the ground, we have 3, actually we have 4, because our tower is a pumper also. we have sufficient number of vehicles to put in line to be able to move water. So it makes no sense to get rid of the functioning vehicle, and it adds so many different avenues and options for us going forward. Again, we put thought process in over the next 30 years and how we can best use manpower, move water, and fight fire. It's like I said, we've got hundreds of hours of thought process into the decision making, and we're not done yet. We're still negotiating, we're still fine tuning. I mean, the specs on this one vehicle are 138 pages, and we've reviewed it line by line. We're on our third go around right now. It's gone back to the manufacturer for them to rewrite it with all the changes, and then we'll go through it again and see if they missed anything or if we missed anything.
And once again, the better the ISO, the better the whole
Correct.
community's fire insurance rates.
Correct. The lower the ISO rating, the better our fire rates for both commercial and residential. And right now, we're at about the best that you can be as a call department.
Jennifer?
Just a question, do you have space for it inside the fire station?
It's tight. We are gonna have to move some stuff around. There's gonna be about 18 inches of space when we put 2 trucks front to rear, but it does fit. So-
Take them.
Well, we will have somebody backing the trucks up when we are moving them in. One of the things is when we had our old engine one with a blown engine parked out back, the last time we went through our ISO rating, they allowed us it to be called a backup unit. So we got credit for a backup pumper. If we get rid of the 98, then we no longer have that, and that would have a negative effect on our ISO rating. So I would rather have a backup pumper that's functional than one out back with a blown engine. And they only want to give us like $8,000 trade-in on it. We paid $38,000 for it 6 years ago, I think, maybe 7. It doesn't owe us anything. It passed its pump test this year. It pumps over its rating. It's an awesome truck, so there's no reason to give it to somebody else when we own it and we can use it. And it adds so many different dynamics and options for us going forward to be able to fight fire.
So one other, if you don't mind, and what is our ISO rating?
I think it's a 4.2, and I think 4.0 is the lowest you can get as a call department or as a volunteer department,
Nice.
non-staffed. So I don't think I wasn't involved with the last rating, so I don't know what the 2/10 is, but it's very few that get down that low. And there's only maybe, Rich could probably tell me, one of my guys, but I think there's less than 51 rated departments in the entire country. So,
And Newport went, Richard Dusso, Newport went from a 6 to a 4. And they only do the ratings every 10 years. So for us to go from 6 to a 4, it was like really, to be honest, I didn't expect it. It was big. And you, like the chief said, you probably won't ever go below that because we're a cold department. So you don't see it, but it has a big effect on your insurance.
Okay, Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr.
No, go ahead. No,
Is,
that's what
is,
it's for.
is there any other benefit for the ISO than to vote to keep the ISO rating? And what's the turnaround time if you order it after, the day after town meeting? when's the
right
early-
now, they're calling for about 430 days to delivery. That could fluctuate. There's supply chain issues all around the world right now with COVID problems, so forth and so on. They're anticipating about 430 days.
What's normal? Is that because
I think it used to be like 360 to 380. So they're running like a month and a half behind
because of COVID?
because of COVID.
Is the only benefit to lower the ISO rating, or keep your is there another benefit? Is there a rig that's on its last leg, so to speak?
No. Again, we historically we have always,
Sure.
for a reliability standpoint, maintained our first due engine at 10 years or less. So we're at 10 years right now. If we order it in March, we're going to be at 11 and a half years.
Do you keep what's the average life expectancy for a truck like that in a big department like Burlington or Manchester, New Hampshire, or something like that?
I'm gonna defer that to Rich, because Rich was
The city
assistant,
of pump is only good like 20 years. The ladder truck, 25 years.
and we generally keep them 30.
Yeah.
But this thing will be $75,000 more if you buy it next year, I guarantee you that.
Yeah, that's your prediction?
Yeah, well, it's gone up since COVID started, almost 200,000,
Oh, okay.
just since COVID. And the prices that they're quoting us are based on us ordering it sometime in March. So they're guaranteeing whatever prices they give us now, good till March. And I know that they've had 3 price increases since August of 3% and 4% each. That's how fast things are changing and how fast things are going up.
But you're locked in, you're guaranteed this price until town meeting.
Until, I think 30 days from town meeting is what, the way.
It's what they're offering.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Singer.
You're welcome. Anything else? Then if not, we'll close the public hearing for this evening. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Just a second, bear with me, I'm doing 2 things. Okay. 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 I'll just leave it like that for now. All right. Now I'm gonna call the regularly scheduled Newport City Council meeting to order for Monday, February 7th, 2022. It is 6:43 p.m. All members of the council are present. Others include Jim Johnson, our clerk treasurer, and our city manager, Laura Dogan. The second item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2022. And I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Vashon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wilson. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. I'll get that down. Okay. Before we go into comments by members of the public, I have a letter that I wish to read. It's a result of accusations made at the last council meeting. I received this today, and I wasn't expecting it, but I'm going to read it for the record. It is from the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. It says, "Dear Paul Manette, we are reaching out to you about the false and misleading quotes that were presented to the Newport City Council on January 24th by Mr. J. Walsh regarding the city's drinking water. We appreciate all the work that the city does to ensure the safety of the drinking water in the city of Newport and find it important to set the record straight on this issue. At the meeting, Mr. Walsh presented a heavily edited quote to the city council. This quote misrepresented an email from Ben Copens, a watershed coordinator with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. The quote that was attributed to Mr. Copens was taken out of context from a larger email, and the broader context was not provided to the city council. Mr. Walsh appears to have excerpted 6 different clauses from a larger paragraph and combined these with additional wording that was not included in the original email in a way that substantially changed the meaning of the quote as presented. The speaker implied that this quote suggested that the city of Newport didn't have much awareness of the source protection area. To be clear, the department has no indications that there are any impacts to the drinking water supply of the city of Newport from the Vermont landfill. Water from the city of Newport public drinking water system has been sampled for PFAS 3 times dating back to 2016. There have been no detections for PFAS, PFAS compounds during these 3 sampling events. Based on the historic sampling results, the water system is required to be sampled for PFAS every 3 years. Since the false and misleading quote is now on YouTube and possibly in the meeting minutes, we would advise the city council to add a note to the YouTube meeting description and associated minutes, if applicable, stating that the statement made by Mr. Walsh was incorrect and that the quote attributed to Ben Copens was not accurately represented. Having a disclaimer will help avoid this misinformation from being spread through links to this city council meeting on YouTube or related meeting minutes in the future. Thanks again for your work to ensure the safety of the drinking water in the city of Newport. Please reach out to us with questions. We're available to talk more with the city council about this topic. Respectfully, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Department of Vermont Environmental Conservation. So I just wanted to read this letter for the record that I received today. And I'm going to give Mr. Johnson a copy to attach to the minutes. And with that, we will move to comments by members of the public. We have Jennifer Hopkins, says correction to...
Follow-up on that letter. See if I can make my voice heard. Also in that handout from Jay Walsh was a page 2, starting with below from Memphremagog Watershed Association, a page on PFAS in the watershed. Just as a correction, that is not on MWA's website. It happens to be on DUMP's website. Don't undermine Memphremagog's purity. So we just wanted to make sure that the city got that correction also.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, we will move on. The next item is the approval of dispatch rates and fee schedule. We have Chief Travis Bingham. Chief?
Good evening, everybody. So I had a chance to meet with all the agencies, most of them either email or in person, and discuss with them the rates and fees that I had come up with for dispatching at the Newport Police Department. So with that letter that was in your packet, that's the memo that I would like to have approved through the council. I don't know if you guys have any other questions on that, other than the formula and stuff, how we came up with it.
I don't have anybody on the council. Then what we need will be a motion to approve the rate and fee schedule for dispatching services.
Move to approve the rates and fee schedule for the dispatching services.
Motion made by Ms. Pedersen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Charbonneau. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. And I will sign this here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the Grandstand Structural Analysis presentation from the Grandstand Association. We have Roger Carty, who is the chair, president of the association. And then joining us online will be Ben Harwood and Hamilton Hodgman. They will go over the technical details of the actual presentation. So this time I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Carty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly want to introduce the members of our committee who've been working on this for over a year. Scott Boskin, a local educator for about 40 years and coach. Joel Collins, a coach and player on a championship team from years ago. Doug Swenson, a local businessman who brought 2 New England tournaments to Newport back in 2002, 2004, and thousands of dollars in economic development for the city. Steve Edgerly, who is well recognized as Mr. Newport, who's been in the middle of just about every project and activity that's taken place here for the last 50 years. Jim Johnson, who is our vice president. Paul Manette, who is our treasurer. Joel is our secretary. I think I get everybody. Okay, from our last meeting back in January of last year, our goal has been to work with the city of Newport to save and rehabilitate Newport's historic Gardner Park Grandstand and make it a community hub, not just for baseball, not just for softball, but for multiple four-season activities. Our belief is that this would be a positive impact on the economic and recreational development of Newport. We have come a long way since our first meeting, having developed a set of bylaws, became a Vermont domestic nonprofit corporation certified by the state February 15th of last year, and on February 16th we became a certified 501c3. We have worked from the very beginning, doing everything we could to keep the city from having to pay anything towards the required floodplain report and the structural analysis. Both have been completed at no cost to the city. It has been an uphill battle from the beginning, with comments coming our way such as, it can't be resuscitated, it can't be rebuilt, it is dilapidated, it can't be saved, it's beyond repair, it's falling down, it's a serious hazard, and it's a project built on emotion, not common sense. A quote in Vermont Digger said the Grandstand was a hazard. And another quote attributed to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns is supposed to have recommended that the Grandstand should be torn down. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns said no such thing. In fact, they recommended in a report dated June 2nd, 2021, that a qualified engineer should be hired to do a structural analysis to determine its structural integrity and safety. This same structural analysis was also suggested to the city by Stewart Engineering back in 2014, when a visual study of the building was conducted. It was suggested by Stewart Engineering that two reports needed to be done, a floodplain study and a structural analysis. The floodplain study was completed months ago, and the structural analysis report has now been completed, and the results will be presented to you this evening by engineers Ben Howard and Hamilton Hodgman of Stevens Engineering. Tonight, we believe that any questions regarding the safety, integrity, and future rehabilitation of the Grandstand will be answered. Thank you. And I believe Ben and Hamilton are right
Yes.
here.
So, either Ben or Hamilton, did you want to share your screen with anything? Oh, we froze.
Are you able to hear me all right?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Able to hear all right? How about me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I can hear you, Ben. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Is it better now?
It's a little better. I'm not sure why you're.
I can turn off my video. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes the video causes the.
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, I can, and I think everyone else can.
Okay. So, yeah, thanks, Roger, for introducing us. As he mentioned, we're picking up, for the most part, where a 2014 report left off. In a quick overview of what we've done is our scope of work has included assessing the current condition of the grandstand. We measured and documented the existing framing. We checked the framing against the current building codes. We spoke with the Department of Fire Safety, the State Historic Preservation Office, the Act 250 Office, and the Regional Floodplain Manager to identify what building codes and permits would be applicable for this project. We also identified accessibility and life safety improvements that should be incorporated into a major renovation, and we actually developed some drawings to illustrate the work that should be done. And we went and had a professional cost estimator provide an opinion of cost for this work. And we put all of our findings and recommendations into the final report that I believe the Grandstand committee has shared. So our work included spending a day on site. We obviously reviewed Bruce Stewart's report from 2014. That provided us a lot of great background about the structure. It's a very thorough report. We had a lot of recommendations that we were able to pick up and run with. And so some of our findings and general impressions. So as far as the overall condition of the structure, we found that little has changed since the 2014 report. And some of the problem areas that were identified back then have bigger problems now. It doesn't look like any remedial actions have been made since that report. But overall, it's encouraging how much of the framing still in decent condition and how much of it is original and unaltered. For a 70 to 80-year-old building, untreated rough pine lumber, it's not enclosed, it's not heated, and it's exposed to the elements year-round. It's actually a good sign that so much of the framing was actually in decent condition. And it does suggest that quite a bit of skill and thought went into the original construction. And so a little overview of our analysis. Our analysis also suggested it's a pretty well-built structure. Analysis of the framing was something that was not carried out in 2014, but it was recommended in Stewart Engineering's report. They didn't go quite that far. And so, for some context on the analysis, this is an existing building, and the building actually, and nothing that we add to the building or that we use the building for is really any different than what's there or how the use has been. So that there's no changing in the loads. But it was recommended at the time that we should evaluate the framing and see how it compares to how current construction would be, designed. So we made some assumptions. We assumed that it's hemlock or softwood framing. We actually found that much of the framing meets current building codes, which was actually a pleasant surprise compared to when I look at many other older structures. So it suggests they did have a good idea of what they were doing, and they might have even overbuilt it for that time period. The roof trusses we found, they were appropriately sized for current loads. The columns appeared to be the right size. The slope framing below the seating, that checked out for current building loads. There were one set of beams under the grandstand that visibly looked fine. They were not sagging or anything. They look like they've been doing great for the past 80 years, but the math on them didn't quite work out, but it would be, so we suggested that we strengthen them anyways, even though they look fine. So the takeaway for me for the analysis was that a lot of the framing that is there doesn't need to be strengthened and is adequate for continued use using current building loads. There are deteriorated areas that need to be replaced, and there are some beams that should be strengthened, but it looks like that can be done pretty readily. Some of the significant issues that we did observe were, as mentioned in Stewart's report, he noted some deterioration and some of the framing at the front aisle of the grandstand at each end of the structure. Bear with me a minute, I'll try sharing my screen here. Are you guys able to see this? Yeah, it looks like it's coming up.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So at these ends of the front aisle, what I've been calling the front aisle, Stuart noticed some of the beams are rotted. During our visit, we noticed that they have, they are now fully rotted and broken. So that would need to be replaced. That was identified in our report and carried in our cost estimate. Similarly, there are steel posts up at the front here, and we did find that there is some deterioration on those posts, and in our recommendations, we've recommended replacing them entirely, as you could repair it, but we've gone with a conservative recommendation on that. We have also, it's not really a deficiency, but at the moment, a lot of posts have been added at the front of the structure. There are those old wooden beams that have those metal tension rods. There are 4 of those beams, and 2 of them they've added more posts to. We've suggested, our recommendations have included replacing those beams. That way we can go back to having big open spans and unobstructed views. And one of the, I know one of the major concerns with this building that I've heard has been, there's an outward bowing in the back wall that Stuart noticed back in 2014, and it sounds like the community has noticed longer than that. It was, we went and we duplicated Stuart's measurements, and we found that it's bowed the same amount that it was bowed 7 years ago. So we know that the building did move, but it seems that it has been stable since. And the only data that we have is from 2014, but it could be, it could predate that. And this would be an easy thing that we recommend. You can continue to measure and make sure that it's not getting worse. We don't believe it's getting worse. Our measurement doesn't suggest that it's getting worse. And we've recommended repairs using steel tension rods to anchor that back wall to keep it from getting any worse. So we think that that's a stable condition at this point. It doesn't really need to be corrected. It is what it is at this point, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So that's definitely one of those are really the key findings on the structural condition side. We also took a look at some of the accessibility. The grandstand was not built with wheelchair accessibility in mind, and it's obviously lacking a wheelchair ramp, and there are no wheelchair spaces, and the aisles are not wide enough for them. So we figured out the way that we can accommodate those pretty minimal changes to the overall layout. The grandstand proved to actually have quite a bit going for it as far as current codes. The size of the seats are acceptable, the size of the steps, or the height of the steps was acceptable, the size of the foot area, the spacing between the benches, that was acceptable. Some of the the overall size of the grandstand, there's an upper limit, and that was acceptable. The height of the grandstand was acceptable. The number of exits, given the number of seats, that's correct. It has 2 exits, it needs 2 exits, so it did have quite a bit going for it as far as, like, surprisingly being in compliance with some of the current accessibility and life safety standards, so that was all pleasantly surprising. We derived a way to widen up the front row by getting rid of this front row of benches and making the second row the new bench, or the new front row. And, you know, we did lose some seats, but I think we've made a more accessible building. Similarly, the current grandstand really lacks handrails throughout. So the way that the benches are built, we found it was pretty easy to widen the aisles and add central handrails, and adding handrails around the walls, at the end walls, and adding aisles at these ends. This has to do with a limit in the code about dead-end rows. Right now, this is a long dead-end row of seats. If we open that up, I think that improves the circulation within the grandstand greatly anyways. So, and we determined that we would need 6 wheelchair spaces for this occupant use. Probably can't do that, but we estimated the current grandstand has approximately 535 seats, and what we worked out, we'll still have about 430 seats, at least in this schematic level. That's what we've determined. So all in all, you know, the main issues with the structure are some condition-related issues with the framing. The building wasn't underbuilt. It's still actually, you know, adequate framing-wise. It's just that it has some framing that has rotted and needs to be replaced. You know, the building was not built with accessibility in mind, but it actually seems to be relatively adaptable without having to make any huge changes. And, you know, I know with older buildings, you know, people worry about opening up a can of worms and uncovering a bunch of surprises and questionable, you know, past repairs or alterations, and that can steer people away from working on these older buildings. But that really wasn't my impression of this building. This building really has not been altered or modified or hacked up as far as I can tell. So I really don't think that that's going to be our experience if we, you know, choose to make these improvements. Pam can talk to some of the permitting. We looked at Act 250 and we looked at some of the floodproofing requirements.
Yeah, and thank you, Ben. I'll just take it and pass it right back to you. Yeah, so this being a feasibility piece, like Ben said, we met on site with with one of the state fire marshals representing the Department of Fire Safety. That's certainly the major permit that would be applicable to a public use facility. We spoke with Act 250 and also did some research on Act 250. There had at one time been a tag on the ANR website saying this lot had a Act 250 permit on it, but it actually was for something down the street, and we had that tag removed. So there really is no very little site work except for potentially adding accessibility ramp. This would not trigger an Act 250 permit if you know, on its own. And by not having an Act 250 permit on the parcel, you shouldn't expect to have one. And even if you did have one, really there isn't much that if you did have an Act 250 permit on the property, your constraints wouldn't truly be constraints. They would be that the Department of Historic Preservation would actually be by jurisdiction required to approve and consult on the modifications because it's an older building. And you would also have to deal directly with the floodplain manager for the region under A&R. Because it's not under that, the floodplain manager is actually just, serves two roles. Sasha Peeler, she serves the A&R as a resource to A&R during Act 250 permits, but she also serves as a resource to towns that operate under the National Flood Insurance Program, which Newport participates in. So the whole building's in the floodplain. When it comes to floodplains and flood maps, they tend to be pretty old and from a different era. So when you look at the map here, it's not the lines are there, but the real point to it is there's no changes they're truly being proposed here, except for potentially a new ramp. So there's not a site improvement thing that issue that would cause a some sort of questionable flood certificate. A flood elevation certificate was prepared prior to our arrival. We reviewed the certificate and looked at how this building would work. The level that's directly underneath the grandstands, which looked like it might have been a ticket booth. It's not mode-based formation. Actually, slightly.
Sorry,
above the flood elevation.
Pam,
Would still.
I think it might be my computer acting up.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
You were breaking up, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's my computer. I think it might be.
Okay, should I go video off for a second?
Why don't you try it and see? I think it might be my computer. I was experimenting with a new camera tonight, and I think it might be causing some of the issues.
Okay, well, I don't need to see myself. We spoke about the what we call in the industry wet flood proofing, which is basically let the water in. Your town zoning doesn't have a wet flood proofing standard, but it does have a requirement that the floor elevation be above the base flood elevation, which that floor is. You meet the town zoning requirements by not building anything lower than that level, and just leaving the inside, providing access for the water to come and go as it pleases below that floor elevation, which it can do right now. And had a conversation with the floodplain manager about it. This is clearly not a porous building. This is clearly not an impermeable building. Water certainly would come in and out underneath the sheathing, and the only thing that I would see as recommendations for flood proofing that would happen during the structural work would be to anchor the building down to those foundations to resist buoyancy and also any sort of lateral loads. So the floodproofing, the floodplain and Act 250 seem to be, okay. We talked about the zoning. It's, what the zoning piece to it would be at adding a ramp for accessibility purposes. Seems to be perhaps as a hearing because it is a conditional use because it's a floodplain project, but it wouldn't be, that would be the only piece to it that would actually be relevant to the conditional use permitting. See what, let me just look at my notes here real quick, see what else we talked about. We'd expect that the work would have to have a niche cap done. Certainly it's got lead paint in that guy. And there tends, wouldn't know if there is asbestos, but that's usually put on contractors who work with this kind of work. And I believe that would be it for this. There was a question raised after our report about the brownfield work in the, there was some brownfield study nearby. I took a skim on that phase 2 study by Stantec. There certainly could be minimal soils excavated for this work, and it could be stored. The soils could be put back underneath the ramp if that were to be the approach to take. There's no reason that this project would have to import or export soil. Well, it wouldn't have to export soils, let me put it that way. And that's pretty much, apart from answering questions, the permitting side of it.
Okay. All right. With that, I know the council has copies of the report, and it was put online today as far as the report. And so I'm curious, I know one council member, Mr. Wilson, already asked me about the cost. Now, we had, I just say, because you had it highlighted, you mentioned it to me. Yeah, he mentioned it to me before the meeting, and I said, well, the hard cost is the $357,000. And then you had soft costs that brought the price up. Maybe you could go just briefly, because we're looking at the clock time-wise, briefly discuss, the cost estimates. Just very briefly.
Sure. I got it. Do you mind if I put it on the screen?
I can, want me to put it up on mine? Might be easier. Oh, I guess,
Sure.
oh, he's gonna do it, yeah.
So yeah, as Mayor was saying, we did get a cost estimate done. We had an estimator who has, 30 plus years of experience. This was not all our office. This is an estimator that we use for these types of projects, and they do things for many, many years. And he does work for a construction company. So these are realistic numbers. He priced it as the current market conditions are now, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, we said his name in the report. This is the chief estimator from DW Construction.
Yeah.
On this, he provides design assistance services on the side for projects. So he's certainly in the business of estimating for coming up with budgets, and also typically on a lot of projects that we put out to bid, DW also provides bids on public projects as well. So
Yeah, there's definitely, he has a method here. As the mayor was saying, there are soft costs that we, provided estimates or allowances for. Final design and permitting, we only took this to a schematic level type of work to get this estimate to understand if this is a viable project, but we would have to do more design and drawing to make this ready for a contractor to take and execute on. Similarly with the permitting, we've discussed the permitting, but we haven't taken any action on doing any permitting work yet. There's permitting fees, that's an allowance based on, just other projects of this size.
It's the DFS permit.
Mostly the DFS, yeah, that's correct, yeah, it is. Construction
It's based on a percentage of your construction costs is your DFS permit. And really when it comes down to your building design and your permitting services in the top two are really just those architectural plans that are to the level that DFS will, and the DFS application and the plans that go out to the DFS, which is basically architectural plans.
Okay.
To some limited extent.
All right.
And the answer is, it's a percentage number of the hard costs. It's just a, for a typical architecture, architect with subs underneath them that would take a project through permitting.
Right. And then there is a contingency built in here. That's on the estimate, and then we also have recommended an owner's contingency. That's just because things happen during construction, and we assume this is not a this year project, so we adjusted pretty sizably for a year's worth of inflation, just prices going up possibly. So that's how we've arrived at our final number. That's like a quick overview. That helps provide any clarity.
Hopefully. Questions? Does anybody have, it was kind of long and it didn't work the greatest of technology, unfortunately. I apologize for that. Any questions from anyone on this report?
So what is that estimated total? Is it the 490 or
491.
491.
And that doesn't include, by others, the lead abatement. There's a couple others up here, legal and municipal bond. But,
Well, there won't be any bonding.
The legal, the lead abatement.
Right.
The water tower where we had to
Right, lead
seal
abatement.
the whole thing off so we don't get a speck into the river.
Right,
And that runs it up.
right.
So my question is basically going to be, where's all this money coming from? 490,000.
Well, there are grants out there.
Well,
Oh, I'm gonna okay, go ahead. Yeah,
Our presentation isn't done, actually,
okay,
so if you
right.
don't mind.
No, I'm gonna let you go on. I just wanted to wrap this part of it up and then let Joel go on,
Okay.
But before we go on, anybody have any questions for Ben or Pam? No? I know it was pretty technical on some of it. Okay. Hey, Joel.
All right. So before I start, and for transparency's sake, I want to introduce myself. My name is Joel Collins, and I am married to Melissa Pedersen, who sits on the City Council. I'm also a member of the Grandstand Preservation Association. So with that out of the way, I just want to take a moment to highlight what our vision is for the Grandstand and how we can proceed towards making this vision become a reality. In the past, the Grandstand stood for a place where the community came together to root for their favorite athletic team or to take part in community events over the summer months. Our vision for the athletic team, our vision for the Grandstand is to not only restore what once was, but to improve upon the concept of a community coming together by making the Grandstand a hub of the community and promoting year-round activities and events that incorporate the Grandstand as a central part of the theme. Our organization is currently looking into a feasibility study funded through grant money to better understand the potential year-round opportunities the Grandstand could provide for our community. We are also researching the possibility of a historic preservation grant. The catch for us is that we don't own the building, which makes applying for grants almost impossible. However, we have been advised that if we could enter into a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, with the City of Newport, we could apply for grants applicable to our vision on behalf of the city. Of course, we would still need to negotiate in good faith with the particulars under this MOU structure, including any legal concerns the city and our organization may have. What the MOU does is allows us to work towards offsetting project costs with grant money. It also shows good faith between the two entities that both are working towards the same goal. Many are ready to donate, but are hesitant to do so until the city gives its approval. The Gardner Park Grandstand Preservation Association believes the Grandstand project can be accomplished through a coordinated effort between the city and our organization. We believe the cost of this project can be offset by grants, corporate donations, and fundraising activities. We are here today to ask for the Newport City Council's approval to proceed with this project. As part of that approval, we are asking to remove the May deadline given to us by the city manager so we can pursue the funding necessary for this project. It also means giving your approval to research the feasibility of entering into an MOU with our entity so we can apply for grants on behalf of the city. We would also report quarterly to the City Council of our progress so that this process does not become a long drawn-out project that never comes to fruition. I understand that some of you may be doubting our resolve, but I want to assure you that with your approval, we will do everything within our power to make sure this project is completed in the most professional and cost-effective way possible. The Grandstand Preservation Association was able to raise the funds over 5 months to contract with Stevens & Associates to perform the structural analysis that now has been presented to you here tonight. Without community support, this milestone would not have been able to have been met, and for that, we are eternally grateful to our impassioned supporters. Historic buildings are disappearing at an alarming rate throughout the country. Communities are losing buildings that have been passed down from generation to generation, and in many cases without having community input on the future of those buildings. In this case, Newport has a chance to preserve a small part of its history for future generations to enjoy. The Grandstand has people that are dedicated and passionate, willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard towards making our vision of the Grandstand a reality. We are not willing to sit on the sidelines and see another historic site disappear. Thank you.
Questions?
So is the goal that this is funded not from the city, but through grants and?
Our goal is to apply for grants, but we have to have permission from the city to enter into a memorandum of understanding because the city owns the building. And that is the one hurdle we have to get over from my conversations is, put Karen on the spot, but you did say to me, because the city owns the building, we as an organization can't just go out and apply for grants. And so, but we're willing to do the legwork. We're willing to we raised the funds to do the structural analysis in 5 months. I mean, it was like, we actually want to do a feasibility study. And Karen gave me an idea of what that would cost and the match. And it's something that, we've already got funds that we feel we could even pay for the match for that already. We just need permission from the city, a formal MOU type. Well, the first thing we want to do is eliminate the May date that the city manager stressed to some of us in meetings, that we only had till May. before it was torn down. Which in my opinion is really a council decision, not just the city manager's decision on that. But you did say we had to May.
I'd like to speak on that, just that one point. I met with Joel Collins and Jim Johnson and asked them if that date would serve them, and I was told that it would. So that was something that was agreeable at that time, and Joel said that should be ample time. So that was something that was the city manager's decision because it was in this fiscal year.
But is
so
it,
now,
the question I have, not to interrupt, is it for the structural analysis or was it to be demolished? Because there's a confusion. There's a confusion amongst everybody.
It was to give them time to do what they needed to do. And it was meant in good faith, and now it seems that there might be some sort of undermining or meaning that is not attributable. That was given in good faith, and I was told that it was acceptable. Now, the budget that was passed has $25,000 set there to be used in this fiscal year. If those funds are not to be used in this fiscal year, then it goes back to you, to the council, for restricting our next steps. So again, that was meant to be helpful, was not meant to be conspiratorial or negative or set anybody up for any kind of miscommunication. So I just want to put that out there, that that was meant sincerely.
Well, can I say something?
Yes.
I think Joel and I did meet with Laura, and she put out the May deadline. And I believe Joel and I both believed that we didn't have any choice other than May at that point. She wanted a plan or a study in by May, which we have done.
Yes,
Now we want that deadline gone, because we've got other things we've got to do. Okay? And if that $25,000 is not spent this fiscal year, it goes back to council, and they can designate that for whatever they want to designate for. If it's for the grandstand in the next year, that's fine. That $25,000 does not go away. So what we're asking for is the date to be removed, because in our estimation, I believe we've met the criteria that was set forth by the city manager.
Paul, can I speak? When this topic came back to our committee, we were under the understanding that in order for anything to go forward, period, any work at all, a structural analysis had to be completed. In the 2014 report, it was suggested by Stewart Engineering that we had to do a flood elevation study and a structural analysis report before anything could be done. That was the impression that we got when this was brought to our committee, and that's what we agreed to amongst our committee, that we had to get this analysis done by May in order to be able to go forward. We couldn't do anything beyond that if we didn't have a report done. So we have been working feverishly to get this structural analysis taken care of and the flood elevation report done before the May deadline, which we thought was, if you don't have it by then and you can't tell us the building is safe, you can't go anywhere. We're going to demolish the building. So we felt that by having the analysis report done, that put us in a situation where the city could say, okay, this is what it says, we're going to eliminate the May deadline, and we're going to go forward with an attempt to, for example, a feasibility study to see if it was going to bring enough economic and recreational development into the city to be worthwhile. And we feel that's where we are now. We didn't feel at any time that if we didn't have everything done, the building's gone. We felt we needed to have the report done.
So the bottom line is we wanted to work on fundraising and apply for grants. And that's what we would like, the committee would like to be able to do. Enter into an agreement with the city to apply for grants on their behalf to save the grandstand. And who has a hand?
Karen.
Oh, Karen?
Just with regard to grants, just keep in mind that an agreement with the city to apply for grants doesn't take care of the ongoing maintenance and costs associated with the building that the city would be responsible for as the legal owner going forward, unless there's a constructed agreement around those costs. for somebody else to take on. So grants would address a current issue if you're looking to do a feasibility study, and that may be what you're seeking permission to do now, is what potential does the building have to contribute, say, to the outdoor recreation economy in various ways. That feasibility study can give you that information. Then maybe there's a second agreement that would allow you to apply for implementation grants. But overall, you would want your feasibility study to include ongoing maintenance costs, ongoing costs of upkeep and so forth. So, and that comes down to a legal, that would come down to a legal discussion of who is ultimately responsible, the nonprofit entity or the city for that. And that's a conversation for the future, but it's a parallel track you have to be mindful of.
Well, we discussed maintenance quite at great length amongst ourselves in that committee. And I came to the conclusion myself, we're here today because of the lack of maintenance, you know. And that's why we're here with a $491,000 cost, is because over the years, the city chose not to maintain it. And not just that facility, we've been here at this table with many other facilities in the city, for some reason, not maintaining them. We had a room full of campers at Prouty Beach because simple things weren't getting done. We had people from the dock here before, you know, so.
Ice hockey rink.
The ice hockey rink over at Gardner Park is in bad shape. And it's things like that. So yes, we understand that there will be long-term maintenance and it's something that's gonna have to be worked out. But I know I personally came to the conclusion that we're here with that dollar amount because of the lack of maintenance. The lack of will to, and the lack of, my opinion, the lack of vision of what it can be used for. My vision is not just baseball, softball. There's a lot of other events that can be held in that park. You know, that park was originally designed way back from my research and newspaper articles as an athletic complex, but it can be used much more than that. And that's what I'm looking at for not only that building, but for the whole park. It could be a piece of an economic driver for the city. You know, you can have different events held there that bring people in. I'm still trying to track down dates of this past summer softball tournaments to try to get the revenue that was generated in the city, because it can be used as an economic driver. So we have talked about maintenance and what will have to be done.
Paul, I think one thing we really need to keep in mind that Ben and Harm told us earlier, that if we go ahead and we rehabilitate the building, you're going to have brand new beams. You're going to have new steel support structure in front. The beams that are in the front are going to be, I guess you call them waterproofed or whatever. So you're not getting a building that is brought back to where it originally was when it was built. You're going to have a much more improved building that is strong and solid, and new beams that are going to withstand a lot. So what are you going to have for maintenance costs? You're going to have to maintain what is there, make sure things don't rot, and if they do, they're taken care of immediately. So I think that the maintenance cost is going to be much, much lower at the very beginning when you've got a new building up there that's going to be much stronger and have a lot more of an impact on the community.
So I would just suggest, because you're speaking of an implementation step, that your feasibility study comes first before you go to implementation, even based on these recommendations.
Yeah.
Because you're going to want to know potentially what that building could be used for, and that will likely require additional structural analysis and change if you're going to adapt this building to other uses. So you don't want to get too far down the implementation road with what is recommended here, which is a great start.
Correct.
But you want a feasibility study that will say, what else can this facility be used for over the seasons? And what will it take to make that building appropriate for those uses? And then you have a plan of what would the economic driver be if we can use it in a 4-season economy. What does it need to look like? What's the accessibility, so forth and so on. So I just caution you in terms of quickly going to grants for implementation based on this, to perhaps looking at funding for a feasibility study that will give you a full range of options for what this can be, if that's the direction you want to go in.
And that's what we've been discussing, actually. That's
Well,
Just want to point out to me, when I hear the report from the structural engineer, it's worth emphasizing that they found that this building was built by builders who really knew what they were doing 80 years ago, and that the building is, because of that, in remarkably good condition today. It would meet present-day codes in many areas. Some of the rotting of the beams are because they didn't have pressure-treated lumber when this was built, and this building gets a lot of weather. So any of those
There
that
are
are replaced will be
8
upgraded.
participants in the
I get
conference.
disconnected.
Please announce yourself.
Sorry. Go
So I
ahead,
just
Scott.
thought those
Here's
are
my
a couple
computer.
points that are worth re-emphasizing to the council.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I know what Karen's saying about the feasibility study, including the maintenance, but I don't believe all these events with the grandstand can be used for are gonna be inside the grandstand seating area. The engineers already said that building is safe for 430 people, and I don't expect there'll be 1,000 sitting inside the grandstand. The events will be on the grounds outside, and all that type of thing. As far as maintenance, we can include it. We're gonna go step by step. We're not gonna rush around to get contractors lined up, although we'd like to, but it's gonna be a first step, one after another. But to me, the maintenance, a lot of maintenance, I don't believe anything been done to that grandstand since Doug had that tournament in 2002 and 2004.
2004 was the last year.
They put a little money into it then, but nothing had been done to that I can remember after that, and I don't believe anything was done before that for a long time. So, you know, Roger's right, when we get this done, if it comes to fruition, it'll be basically a new building. And I think, if nothing has to be done to it for 5 or 6 years, if a few $1,000s put into a sinking fund for painting and replacing a board here and there, I don't believe the maintenance is gonna be a factor in this at all. And if you're just talking about replacing a board and painting the outside once in a while.
Well, and, can I speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't ask me, ask you.
Well, okay, Scott brought up, I'm done, Scott up the point of pressure treated lumber. The whole beams, other than the two ends that are rotten, is because of neglect of maintenance. It was open, the floors were rotten, snow piled up, and everyone knows here when we have a thaw, it melts, refreezes, and that is the only section. Those two beam sections can be replaced. Those beams are standard lumber, construction lumber, engineered by the builders in 1929. These guys knew what they were doing. They have, this building can be picked up and moved anywhere you want. There's no foundation, you've got concrete footings, and everything is above the ground. Water will come in, water will go out. They knew that in 29.
39.
Or 39. Was it 39?
39.
All right, well, what's the big deal? But even still, back then.
Yeah.
And those engineered beams are solid, other than the two end pieces, which, you know, could have been closed up and could have eliminated that problem.
I'm having a hard time breathing with this tonight for some reason. I'm gonna take it off if anyone doesn't mind. I don't know why. For some reason, must be my asthma's kicking in. Laura?
So a couple of questions that you may have already addressed in your vision, but I'd like you to address in your vision who meets the cash match of the grants. I think you said the association will, but I'd like you to address that. In your vision, I'd like to know what you foresee as who's going to be operating the facility, assuming that you're successful in your rehabilitation. Who will fund the events? So what will it look like in your vision? How do you network events, and who's going to do that work for you? And would the city consider selling this to the association for $1, since you have your nonprofit status on both a state and federal level? Would that give you the same tools you need in terms of your funding so that the city can still help you if you need to have grants, but then we're assured that the cost.
First of all, it's on city-owned property, and I think it's a city responsibility to maintain it and to keep it going, as far as that aspect, as far as it's city-owned property. As far as the funding, our group, as we said, was willing to work for the fundraising matches for grants, the best we can. First, I think Karen, we need to get through the feasibility study, is what Karen recommended, and then we need to go from there. As far as the long term, as far as events, I mean, anybody could rent it out and have an event, you know. I don't see it as, we have other people who use Gardner Park all the time, so I don't see it whereas the city would have to be the one running all the events over there. Is the way I look at it. But the rec department used to put on events all the time at Gardner Park. You know, I mean, some of it's their responsibility too. I mean, they could hold events over there. That's the way I look at it. It shouldn't come on to this association. We only formed the association because we thought it would be beneficial at the time. And that's why this association and the committee was formed. And I'd be honest, I forgot, when it came, Cameron's one that reminded me about the grants and the ownership. That completely went over my head. You know, I was thinking of other nonprofits that had applied for grants, you know, on different projects around the country from my research. I completely went over my head about the city being the owner and having the grants, you know, having that as a stipulation. And so, that's the way I look at it. Roger, did you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I think from the beginning, in my opening remarks, I said working with the city, and I neglected to include Recreation Department, but I thought that was part of the city. Our feeling was to work with the Recreation Department because they work on activities in the city. And if we could make that facility open and available to them and work with them on activities down there, we already have a list of activities we put on paper this long, of things that could take place down there. We felt that the Recreation Department's always looking for money to help their budget and to help them expand their offerings. And we thought if we could help them and work with them on coming up with activities that could take place down at Gardner Park, that would be a perfect fit for both of us. And that we would do everything we can in raising money to keep costs away from the city. We've done that so far. We're not going to guarantee, we don't know what's out there for grant money to cover the $400,000 or whatever, but we're willing to do the legwork. We've been doing legwork for over a year, came up with the money that nobody expected us to come up with to pay for a floodplain elevation report and the analysis. We agree 100% that a feasibility study has to be done first. A feasibility study comes back and says, this is what this is going to bring into the city, it's worthwhile, fine. Then the city can say, we want to go ahead. We're trying to help. A lot of people said, you just want to save the building because it's an emotional thing, and you can say, oh, there's the ballpark, there's the grandstand again. You've got 7 people that have lived their lives in this community. We understand economic development, and we understand recreation development. And when we saw what could potentially happen there, I think back to the days I grew up chasing balls underneath that grandstand at 8 years old. I lived on that park. I know I'd go over there every Sunday when ball games were being played. We see the possibility of more than baseball and softball over there. Friday night at the movie, a big projector up, a screen out front, people sitting in the bleachers, popcorn, drink, dances over there, musical, ATV. The ATV group has already agreed to come down and do ATV rodeo or whatever they call them. You know, there are all kinds of things. We feel that we can work with the Recreation Department and help them put on these activities. And this is going to help strengthen the department, strengthen the city, and also strengthen our association to help them even more.
And I'm just gonna, go ahead.
I think we're willing to apply for the grants and raise the money where it doesn't cost the city anything, but I don't want to get into a situation where we do all the legwork and raise all the money and do all the repairs, and the city doesn't, they just wash their hands of it and don't do a darn thing to it, like it's been in the past. To me, if we do put $300,000 or $400,000 into this thing, the city's got to have some skin in the game. It's their building. $4,000 or $5,000 a year put in a sinking fund for maintenance is very little to ask after $400,000 or $500,000 been spent rehabilitating the building. And I grew up down there playing ball just like Roger did. And it was a good time. And when I was in high school playing ball down there, Roger was the same thing at Sacred Heart. That grandstand was full every ball game. And it's great to have the ballpark back again, but we don't want it to be just softball and baseball. It's got to fit this recreational plan the city's got where there's something going on year-round in the city. And we're willing to do the work, we're willing to raise the money, but when it's all done, the city's got to have some skin in the game. That's my personal feeling on this. I don't mind doing the work. We've done it for a year. We raised a lot of money to pay for all this stuff. We'll continue to do it. But I don't want to get it all done and the city say, oh, great job. See you in another 50 years and you can start raising money again.
I'll be gone
That's
by
not
then.
the way
I'll be dead and gone pushing up daisies.
That's not what I want to see.
Dandelions, probably. Okay.
Can I just, because Joel mentioned that in his presentation, he said where the city's rapidly losing its history. So I just want to read this. I'm going back a little bit to Centennial, just in case people forgot. So I wrote this down. This city has had a storied past, from Rogers Rangers, the railroad, to steamers on the lake, to the yacht club. How many people know that we've had 2 Vermont governors, 1 New Hampshire governor, a United States senator, 2 secretaries of state, a U.S. Interstate Commerce Commissioner, an astronaut, and a Supreme Court justice, all born and raised in this city. Now, talk about history. There aren't many places in this country can say that. We had dance halls, Lady of the Lake, the Anthemus, 4 hotels on Railroad Square. Of course, we got the library now, one of the only buildings left. To my estimation, the city has 2 remaining city-owned historical structures, this building and the library. And of course, the grandstand, which we're trying to save. We believe the grandstand can be a vital asset to the city and fits perfectly in the city's recreational development. We can't afford to just wipe away any more of the city's history. And I also like to read, if you'll give me permission, I see Bonnie Palmer's on the video, on the call. She wrote a letter to us about a year ago that absolutely describes what we're trying to do here. She says, with great pride that I read the efforts being made to restore and preserve one of the last great remnants of our historic life in Newport. To the young, no doubt, see Gardner Park Grandstand is old, dilapidated, no longer useful, and occupying space that should be relinquished for something new. But there is a special grace that accompanies respecting and protecting the old, be it people or things. What has gone before stores memories of the heart, of a time that cannot be recovered, of a heritage belonging to those that lived it, their children, and their children. She said, I'm a proud Newport daughter, raised by a proud Newport parents. I've sat in that grandstand as a child, excited by its grandeur. Through the eyes of a child, it was magnificent and can be again. Thank you, the Gardner Park Preservation Committee, for all your efforts to explore the possibility of saving one of the last remaining vestiges of Newport's history. That describes what everybody had donated to us so far. This is what they felt in one letter. So with that, that's my
Okay.
Well, if I may add one thing,
Yeah,
a lot of people don't, and I'll make it quick.
Yeah, because I'm
Sit
looking
down
at the
and be
time.
quiet. A lot of people don't know that there were approximately 4 wood grandstands that were built during the WPA workforce back in 1941. Newport has, we believe, the only last wood structure remaining in Vermont. There's a building in Montpelier, but they've added cement and steel. UVM, they've added all kinds of cement and steel. We believe that this is the only wood structure, all wood structures still in existence, going back to when it was started construction in 1939. So I just wanted to let people know that. This is the last one. It's all wood, last one. We want to just see it go the way of demolition.
Okay. So what I would like to see is, first, I'd like to see the city support eliminating that May deadline and give us time to do the feasibility study. That's the first step. At least eliminate that and give us time to, and give us permission to apply for a feasibility study. We'll do the legwork. We'll do the matching fundraising. I mean, as it's been said many times, this hasn't cost the city anything for what we've done, except it's cost the 7 of us our blood, sweat, and tears, and some sleepless nights doing things. And I came into this as history. And if you look at the history just recently, they moved the whole railroad station down in New Haven, that it was going to be demolished for Amtrak. They actually physically picked up this building that was built in the 1800s and moved it because they want to preserve history. I know Lindenville just got a grant to preserve a covered bridge down in Lindenville. They want to preserve history. And I mean, I always say you need to look to the future, but you must never forget the past. That's what I always have said since I got on this council. You got to look to the future, but don't forget your past. And I firmly believe that. So that's one thing I would like to see, is that May date eliminated. So the $25,000 is not used to demolish it. It can be kept for the next year's budget. It does not have to be spent this year. No money in the city budget has to be spent in the fiscal year that the voters approved it. So it doesn't have to be. So that, I think, so the May date, and allow us to work on trying to figure out how to apply for the feasibility grant and what steps we need to do there. Those are the two big things that I would like to see the council let us do.
Can you do that without the MOU?
We really should have an MOU for the feasibility grant, because it is, because, am I correct, Karen, it would have to come to the city? Or how does that work, the MOU?
For an MOU, well, you should have permission of the city to do an appropriate feasibility study. You will have to have people on the property, and doing that kind of analysis really should have the approval of the owner. It would be like somebody coming into your house and saying, you've got a historic house, I want to come in and do a study on it. So you really, for a number of reasons for the grant, you really want to have the owner of the property, if not applying themselves, giving a clearly stated approval that you have the authority to do that study.
Okay.
Can I ask Karen a question? Karen, that one MOU, will that cover all the grants that we should apply for after feasibility, or do we have to come for one for every grant?
Well,
I don't have to be coming back here every 6 months applying for
Right,
MOU.
so the MOU, you can structure an MOU however you feel is best for what you're looking to do. And I would probably think that the city is going to want to say, maybe an incremental, maybe right now it's for the feasibility study, and then once you have that information and have a plan of how you're going to put together a financial portfolio of grants and however it will go, then you may want to structure an MOU for that stage. But you would be able to structure an MOU for all grants as long as the city's willing to do that.
That would be my preference, because you never know who's gonna be the council to be made up of in 3 or 4 years from now.
There will be a decision point after the feasibility study. It'll be sort of a go or no go.
Oh yeah, that's where we want to do it, so.
That's what I would suggest, is that your first MOU really focuses on permission to apply for feasibility work. And then once you get that information and you can all sit down and consider what that information tells you and your way forward, then you structure another MOU for that way forward.
Mr. Mayor, who would draw up the MOU?
Don't look at me, I don't.
Whoever the city manager, whoever the president is, and then
We could work,
some lawyer.
I mean,
You have a committee to work on it?
we could come up with a draft
3 or
and
4.
present it to the city, and she
Sure.
could have it reviewed by the city attorney.
Yeah.
Or just, we can come up with a draft MOU.
Karen, would you be able to offer input, since you have a lot of knowledge about grants and...
I can offer input on process for sure, because some grants are going to have specific requirements regarding ownership and ultimate ownership of the property regarding the grant. So you may have to structure MOUs differently based on the types of grants you're going after.
She don't have it.
Okay.
Maybe she can go, she don't have it.
So,
So has the city entered into MOUs before?
yes, we entered into MOUs, well, it's,
Like standard operating.
we entered into
Yeah.
an MOU with Vass for the snowmobile trail, we entered into an MOU on ATVs. There's been other MOUs, I believe, in the past, and so it's,
Is it normal operating procedure to have the entity bring the first draft of the MOU? Or can the city do that as well?
Well,
Doesn't matter
It
to us,
would
I'm just asking a procedural question.
procedurally, what I need is what you want, and then it becomes a negotiation, basically. We're gonna be able to
Yes.
give some and not give some. So if you provide a draft, then we can put some legal language on it.
So just to throw another wrench into the process for you to consider, but it's good to have it all in front of you. City currently holds an RCDI grant that supports grant writing services and so forth. And the city has a current list of priorities for where grant money is going, what grants are being applied for through that process. So in this instance, you may want to consider the MOU to not include the RCDI funds and money. It's up to the city. But the MOU, because you're potentially competing against yourself for grants, if the committee is going after a grant and the city has a priority that's going after the same grant, it's still city property competing against city property. So you may want to consider how that plays out in terms of the priorities and what grants you're going after. And so I inject the RCDI process only because currently that's how the city has supported its grant applications in that way. So you may want to either potentially exclude that, or if it's included, then the project gets evaluated within the city's overall priority listing for projects through the RCDI. So Laura, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It's just a point that's worth considering up front.
okay.
So a motion would be made to eliminate the May deadline and to enter into a MOU with the Grandstand Revitalization Committee. For the purpose of getting a feasibility study, and there will be communications every quarter or half year.
So you usually, depending on the grant you apply for, there's a quarterly report that's required for the granting agency. So it would probably work to have a report to the city quarterly.
Quarterly report, and that no taxpayer funds be directly earmarked for it.
For the feasibility study.
Yeah, for the feasibility study. And then pending that, it would be reviewed or renewed.
Okay, is that a motion?
You can dress it up, yeah.
Did the best I could while this was.
Okay, so I'll call that a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Made by Mr. Charbonneau, second by Mr. Wilson. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I just, again, with the utmost respect, Melissa just voted, and her husband is part of the.
I will let her address that.
Yes, I am married to Joel Collins. He is my husband. He is a member of the association group. I am not a member of that group. There is no conflict of interest in this. We gain nothing financially. We gain nothing personally from it. It's strictly a project that he's working on, and I am not.
And for the record, if it had been a tie, I would have voted. And I know you would have called me on a conflict. And I have no personal gain. The only personal gain I'm seeing out of this is preserving history of the city of Newport that some people want to tear down.
You know what?
And that's the bottom line.
It's
It's no conflict of interest. You're only raising that because, I'll be very blunt to the audience, you're hell-bent on tearing the grandstand down. And I said it, I wasn't going to say it, but I'm saying it. And so we had a motion, and everybody voted in favor of it. We're ceasing discussion.
I would like to say that the question that I asked is not only for my benefit, it also is an ethical point, and it's okay to raise it because you have a right to respond. That's it. So I feel, I'm glad I asked the question that needed to be asked.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it was the 400,000, that's the total, or is that the?
That's just an estimate.
I just want to make sure that it's clear.
That's
in
an
my head.
estimate, 491,000. But there's some other costs that can be involved.
Yeah, and as it takes all this time to come up with the monies for it, you know, the price is gonna go up. Nothing ever seems to come down.
Or they could come down.
Yeah, well,
Because right now, I believe they quoted some of these prices in the current market with lumber and with the shortage.
yeah.
Yeah, with the supply chain.
With supply chain.
Supply chain, probably. You want to keep in mind, there's a couple of things in there that we don't feel we need.
Right.
But it's a 491, Mr. Mayor, it's a 491, the feasibility study too, or
No,
just?
that's separate. 491,000 is for the grandstand. There was 357 in what they called hard cost, which is the actual cost to do the structure, what they considered the structure. The other additional fees was for contingencies, permitting, engineering.
There was a tax in there.
There was a tax, that you don't need a tax. There was a cost for clerk of the works, right? What do you call that?
Project manager.
Project manager.
Chris, keyword, estimate,
Estimate.
just an estimate.
Mr. Mayor, may I just ask, if I could ask Mr.
I gotta
Crosby,
get moving on, because we gotta move
Can you
on.
email me the packet that you had?
I can give you my packet.
There you go. We'll take it.
Would you like?
Here. Oh, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
It's online, but you can have my packet. I don't think I wrote anything in there. No, that's a clean packet.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'm slow on the uptake. I'm sorry for being slow, but I heard you say something that I have to just point out, that you attributed something to me without speaking to me. You said that I was hell-bent against this project. And that's not appropriate to attribute something like that to me when you have never had a conversation with me about that. So I just wanted to point that out, that others have tried to do that to me before, and I'm not, tonight, I'm gonna call it out, because it's not okay. So, thank you. And
You're welcome.
I appreciate the conversation.
Okay, we'll move on. The next item is the Rural Business Development Grant Application, Karen Garrity.
So, I think you all received an email earlier today that there's been a brief change in what we're asking tonight, and I'll explain that momentarily. I'm just going to give a very brief outlook, an overview. We have been talking for a number of years on the Newport's outdoor recreation economy, and what we're in now is what I would classify as phase 3, excuse me, which is activating the economic engine of the outdoor recreation economy. So next slide.
Just a second.
So we know, of course, 2016, this is what our main street looked like. The impact on our economy is not just the failure of EB5, but we've had legacy economies in place for a while. We used to have the railway, we used to have our lumber, and we've really been a community in search for a new economic engine, you know, for a number of decades.
So EB5 is only the most recent example of an unfortunate economic impact for downtown Newport. But people ask about what are we going to do, for example, with this situation? You do have to create a need. You have to create a market. You have to create new consumers coming in so that we're not passing the same dollar around to each other every time we turn around. We need an infusion of new dollars. And the way to do that is to develop another economic sector. And so starting in 2016, what we started with, next slide, as you'll recall, was our Look to the Lake economic strategy. We have this magnificent asset in our community. It used to be, it's a commercial waterway. It used to float logs down the lake. We had pulp mills all along the lake. You've seen the pictures. That was the economic driver of this community, one of them. And we now have to convert this and our other natural assets into economic drivers for our community. So we adopted this in 2016 of look to the lake, what can this do for us as an economic driver, and came up with the idea of developing our outdoor recreational assets as an economic strategy for Newport. Next slide. So phase one was really identifying our magnificent outdoor recreational assets. And this map, which I recognize is difficult perhaps to see, but it essentially starts, if you look down on the bottom, right down at the docks, and moves up through Gardner Park, over by the Bluffside Farm, past the hospital and the Men for Magog Ski Touring Foundation, up the BB Spur, always with the lake within visible distance, all the way to the Canadian border, 7 miles north. We also have Eagle Point Wildlife Management Area, which is listed as one of the 10 best birding spots in the state of Vermont. So we have these incredible assets along this trail that have been identified to really draw people in. So in phase one, when these were identified, we did some development and some studies around them, and to see where we could make linkages to make the pieces greater than the whole. To make the whole greater than the pieces, I'm sorry. So we moved then into phase two, which was, the next slide please. Which was building our outdoor recreational infrastructure. So building connections so that we could connect these pieces together in a way that would actually draw people in to have the experiences on this trail. So the next slide please. Some of you have been out to Bluffside. This is magnificent, this trail system that has been built out on the Bluffside Farm. It's one of our many built environments now for the outdoor recreation economy. The Prouty Connector Trail is another system that was put in place to help with the linkages between these outdoor recreation assets. Next slide, please. So we are now into what we're calling phase three, which is activating this economic engine. It's not enough just to have the assets. Now we have to convert the assets into an engine that is going to work for us to bring economic development into our community, to bring new consumers, new pedestrians, new interest into the communities, interest in building, interest in expanding and developing new businesses. So how do we do that? And that's why I'm here tonight. Part of what we're doing to activate this outdoor recreation economic engine, it's nuts and bolts. We have to get wayfinding signage. We have to have facilities for visitors coming into the community. All of these things that go into what we call destination development. When you go to a place, you have to have these things in place for visitors coming in. So if you go to the next stage, so for example, the downtown organization has been very busy developing new logos, new branding, and these are just examples. This is the old sign on the left, what we have on Main Street. This is potentially an example of a new sign for wayfinding, to tell people where these recreation paths are, how to get from the paths to the downtown. Next slide, please. Oh, that's just in green. That's another one. Next slide. So if we leave it here for a moment, the goal is going to be really in this next phase to drive people from the trails into the downtown. So the city currently has a grant, a bike and pedestrian grant, in the amount, the grant itself is in the amount of, I believe it's $47,000. This is one that you have, $48,750, and the city has already committed a one-to-one match to that, which brings the total value of this grant of $97,500. And the city is engaged with the downtown organization to work on developing signage, wayfinding signage for vehicular traffic, so that when you're coming off the interstate and you want to know where the Bluffside Farm is, there will be signs that will direct you to that for vehicular traffic. What we don't have in place right now are signs on the trails, on the assets that direct people from the trails into the downtown. And that's the piece that we're working on right now. So the group that's working with the Northern Forest Center to apply for a rural business development grant, that's going to be the scope of that project. And what we're here to ask the council tonight, originally it was a two-part ask, to ask the city to be the applicant on the grant and to commit the funding that you have currently, that other grant funding and its match, as a match to that grant. I met this morning with the group, and because we're dealing with federal property, which is the wildlife management area, we're dealing with state property, which is essentially the BB Spur Trail. It complicates things in some ways to have the municipality be the applicant for the grant to some extent. The working group thought that it would be better to have the Northern Forest Center be the actual grant applicant. It provides some more flexibility. So we're not here to ask for a resolution to have the city apply for the grant. What we are here to do is to still ask the city if they would be willing to commit as a partner in this development, to commit that bike and ped grant that you have with its match as a match to the RBDG, the Rural Business Development Grant. So we would leverage that grant and that match that you already have. There's no additional money that's required. We would just match that to this other USDA grant. And that will make that application very competitive to be able to match that funding source and that commitment. It makes sense because it's an extension of what you're doing already. We're talking about wayfinding signage and developing businesses in the downtown. So is it clear what I'm asking for and what I'm not asking for? I guess it's just.
Can I back up?
Sure.
So these signs, is part of the grants to replace what's downtown?
Exactly. Well, I'm not involved in this particular project, but yes, it's to update and improve the signage with additional signs on there for what's there now.
So the wayfinding grant that we got takes those existing signs on the left and it updates them so that the end product is going to take the logo that was adopted and it's going to look very similar to that one.
So you're gonna be updating, you're not replacing them?
Correct.
You're not getting all brand new signs?
No.
You're actually gonna take these out, paint them, from what I understand, I guess, and paint them and put in new?
Yes.
Okay.
So it looks updated and refreshed. And the grant that we have is for vehicle use. The grant that Karen is talking about is for trail users and amenity users.
So I'm thinking, so the signs along the trails, would they look like these?
It would match.
They would, that's part of the development of the project, that there will be a working group, that it will be, the goal is to drive traffic from all sides into the downtown. So there will be signage. What it ultimately looks like, there have to be design components. We want to be mindful of language issues, so there will be a lot of, if you go back to that sign, yeah, you'll see the signs that are basically multilingual. You can read them without having to read words. So the development of design will be part of this study, the scope of part of this study. And but the scope is going to focus on the trail system in all the various corners and providing signage to move people from the trails into the downtown versus what's going on now, which is moving vehicular traffic that's in the downtown to the trails. So you would have two directions. And again, we're not asking the city to be an applicant on this particular grant application, but to leverage what you already have. It doesn't commit you to any more funding. It takes what you have existing, and it's about a $97,000 match to the grant work that you're already doing.
I see a que-
Yeah.
So the signs for the trails, which makes sense, will be on federal property, private property, state property?
They will be potentially on, well, state property for sure with the BB Spur. There will be some likely federal with the Eagle Management. And then you have various, like Bluffside Farm, you have Memphremagog Trails and so forth. You would have signage at certain points directing people to portions on the trail. And that's part of what has to be scoped at as well. Where does it make sense to put some of this signage? Because these individual entities also have some signage on their trails already in existence.
So what we're asking is to use the money that we already basically have, just shift it over so it makes the grant process
We're not
easier.
shifting, yeah, we're not shifting any money. We're leveraging what you've
Leveraging
already
that.
got to say, as a stakeholder, we will commit this as match. It's not gonna be spent on the new grant, it's a match to the grant. So that we say the city has invested already $97,500
Okay.
in this.
Mhm.
And we're applying for this grant that this will be used as a match for.
So
But it's,
who owns all those signs out on the trails? Once we do this leverage, we allow that, we're done with it, right? It's the property owners or whoever, who owns them?
yeah, so that's a great question. And that's something that the group has to discuss because when you apply for the grant, you have to have that ownership piece. And so that's part of that scoping piece of what does it mean, who owns what pieces, for sure.
Because I'm assuming we own these.
The city ones, I would say.
We own the ones right on the city sidewalk.
Yeah.
So the question is, who's gonna own all along here?
Yeah, exactly.
And maintain them year in, year out?
And that's why that's one of the reasons why not having the city as the applicant makes more sense. Because you're not coming in as the owner of property, owner of signage, you're coming in as a stakeholder and committing a match to the process, but not as an owner.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Where you have boardwalk, could you put boardwalk / dock, city dock?
It
Should be on there.
Yeah,
somewhere.
and you're exactly right, it is. It's hard to see on the map that's down there. If you go back to the map there, Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's number 1 where it says Newport City.
Yeah.
It's actually called, so it's the Gateway Center and the Boardwalk, which goes to the downtown. But this is why we need a number of eyes on this, because there's assets we don't want to miss. And that's the Boardwalk segment for sure through the downtown. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, Newport already has wayfinding signs, you're just gonna refurbish with new graphics, basically. You're gonna use the panels and the posts.
Well, that particular project
Right.
I'm not involved with.
That's separate from
There's-
this, Doug.
Yeah, that's a separate one.
Well, when you get onto the point where private property, whoever is you're gonna have to reconstruct, you're gonna have to put in, they're gonna have to have that expense of new signs.
Well,
Not
that's-
so much a reverberation.
Yeah, well, that's where, as part of this process, you have to get the stakeholders together to say, and you have to carve out, what is this gonna look like, what do we want from this? People who have properties that they're investing in outdoor recreation are gonna want signage of some sort. But what does it look like in terms of maintenance and ownership and so forth? That's part of this process of developing that shared agreement. If you think about the Kingdom Trails down in Burke and what they have to do through a number of private properties that form the trails, this is a similar process.
Okay.
That's everything. Oh, I just want to say, I'll point out, I think the next slide will do it. So I just want to point out that when we first started talking about this, we had Tony Pomerleau still with us. And he came when we had the initial disappointment with the EB5 failure. And he basically said, we know that Tony had done business in the city since the 1920s. And he believed that the future was bright. And if you turn to the next slide, you'll recall that in 2018, he was the Grand Marshal of the parade. His anniversary date is tomorrow, actually, ironically. And so here we are, just a few short years later, 4 short years of him giving us encouragement after the disappointment with EB5 and saying, nope, Newport will rally. Look where we are now. So I just wanted to point that out as kind of a
That's
nice
the that's the
personal
picture.
touch.
That's
Yeah.
the picture right up there.
Yeah. So it just happened that tomorrow is the anniversary for him, so.
Any other questions for Karen? Then I guess we would need a motion
To commit, and you have that letter, so the motion would be to commit the current grant, that small bike, and I take the last paragraph, to commit the small bike and pedestrian project grant in the amount of $48,750 with the city's cash match of $48,750 to the RBDG project, to the RBDG, the Rural Business Development Grant application for the wayfinding signage.
That is this,
So it's that, yes, it's that last line, we pledge these resources as a match for the USDA RBDG application.
okay, so we need a motion.
It's basically this.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is it this resolution that needs to be read?
Yes.
So to read that last line.
I move that the city pledge the resources of the existing small bike and pedestrian grant as a match for this Northern Forest Center USDA Rural Business Development Grant application.
Nope, sorry, the motion's been made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, any discussion? And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. So we have to sign this resolution.
You sign that.
So, I'll let her
I do, yeah.
do it. Now, vote on the 7th. February, the second day of February. Oops, I'm sorry. Doing, it goes back down to this end.
Thank you.
Okay,
Do you want it now?
that was filled out okay?
Yes, I just wondered, I'm gonna fax it, I mean PDF it to her, but
If you want it, or I can take it, I just didn't want to take it from you.
I'd love a copy of it. I'm sorry, can you guys go ahead, because I think you can do the next one. You can start the next one without me. I'll just take care of this.
You can have that pen, I have another one.
I'll put it up.
Okay. Next item, coin drop request. We have a list of all the coin drops. We have veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Auxiliary, May 28th. Newport Parks and Recreation, June 11th. Newport Fire Department, July 9th. American Legion Post 21, August 13th. The Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Post, September 10th. The Newport Recreation Committee, October 8th. And the Disabled American Veterans, November 12th. Let's see, those are the dates of the coin drops. Now, I'll go through the times too. The first one, the VFW, was 8 to 2. Parks and Rec, the second one, was 9 to 3. The Fire Department was 8 to 2. The American Legion Post 21, 8 to 2. Veterans of Foreign Wars, 8 to 2. The Recreation Committee, 9 to 3. And the DAV, Disabled American Veterans, 9 to 3. And we would need a motion to approve the coin drops for 2022.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the coin drops as printed and have the city send out letters letting entities know that it's been approved.
Motion made by Mr. Wilson to approve the coin drops. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Charbonneau to approve the coin drops and ensure that a letter is sent letting them know that it was approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Who made the motion?
John.
John and Kevin seconded. Okay. Next item is a parade request. Newport Recreation is requesting to host the annual Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 30th, 2022, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. This event is organized in partnership with the Newport American Legion Post 21. That is the first parade request. And the second one is requesting to host the Light Up the Night Parade on Saturday, December 3rd, 2022, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. following the Pomelo tree lighting. And those are the two parade requests that we've received so far. I can tell you that the American Legion has been holding the parade for as long as I can remember on that date. And then the Light Up the Night Parade, this would be the third year that they have it. They skipped, no. Yes, they had it, and they skipped a year because of COVID. They had it this year, so this would be the third year that they have the parade.
Yeah.
And so those are the requests for parades. Any questions from the council? If not, then I guess I would entertain a motion. All the paperwork's been filled out. They've all been basically reviewed by each department, and...
Well, it will be.
Oh, will be.
Yes,
Oh,
as part
I'm
of-
sorry, I thought it was, no, the checks haven't been checked yet.
Right.
But they will be reviewed by each department, but,
Yes, yes.
okay. So we do need a motion to approve the parade request.
I'll move to approve the parade request, for the Recreation Department, the May 30th date and 2022, and the December 3rd date, 2022.
Motion made by Ms. Pedersen, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vashon, discussion? Then hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it, motion carries. Next item is the zoning administrator appointment. We received a memo from the planning commission chair, the zoning applicant interview recommendation. George B. Cud? Cud, he says Cud, okay. Cud interviewed for the position of zoning administrator on January 13th in the front of DRB Chair John Hallomer, planning commission members Dennis Chanette, City Mayor Paul Manette, City Manager Laura Dogan, and the planning commission chair John Manette. Based upon the interview is our unanimous recommendation that the city council appoint Mr. Cud as zoning administrator effective immediately. So we need a motion.
So I'll move that we appoint George B. Cudd to the, excuse me, God, I can't talk tonight, to the zoning administrator position, starting immediately.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Made by Ms. Pedersen, second by Mr. Wilson. Discussion on the motion? I see a smile on the current acting zoning administrator. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I can see him smiling back there. Okay. Moving.
He doesn't have to resign now.
No. Okay. Moving on, new business. Yeah, I was just gonna, the only new business I have is I just wanna commend the rec department for the skating rink. It's wonderful to see all the lights and the activity at the park with the skating rink. To see, and then I know there's been discussions about the fountain over in the park. I know we had an email from someone who was concerned about it, but my comment is, you see those type of fountains all over the state. One was just featured, I can't remember, one was just featured on Channel 3 News. Was it? There was
over Plattsburgh.
Plattsburgh, but also one in Vermont, Putney or somewhere in Vermont. You see them all over, and I think it's great having the light on it, and it just adds to the wintertime, especially during the doldrums of January and stuff like that. So that's all I had on the new business. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I've got a liquor license for Jimmy Quick. It needs to be signed. So I'll put this. No, it's on this side. This side. Pass it down. And the other one I've got is a application for a special event permit for Caledonia Spirits Incorporated. This is in connection with the Kingdom Swim event. It'll be at the east side. I think it's a wine tasting.
That's for the swim.
They do it every year.
It's the last weekend, I think, of February.
And they've been here quite a few years.
Yep.
So I will need a motion on this special events.
Then make that motion then.
Mr. Charbonneau made the motion to approve the Caledonia Spirits, what's it, permit?
Yeah, special events.
Special events
At the
permit.
east side.
At the east side.
That's on February 26th.
26, right, because the actual swim is on the 26th. So a motion's been made, is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mr. Charbonneau, second by Mr. Wilson, discussion? Then, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it, motion carries. We don't need to sign anything on that one, right?
No, I'll do it.
Okay. Any other new
Everybody
business?
gets to sign that? Okay.
Any other new business? Mr. Charbonneau?
Just a shout out to Public Works, did a great job clearing Main Street. We drove through today and all the sidewalks, the snow banks are gone. A lot of work at cleaning up after the snow. It was good to see Main Street was cleared.
Anything new? No? Mr. Wilson?
None.
I don't have any new. Mr. Vashon?
Kind of new old, but both to rec and public works for that tunnel system. Like, it's the talk of the town for all the kids that I work with, so good on you guys.
Okay, anything?
We're starting to plan for our midsummer community summit update. So that's gonna be on June 15th this year, and I'll talk more about it as we get more structure to it, but we have the date and the facilitator nailed down. So please expect to hear more about that.
Okay.
Is it June what?
I think it's June 15th is a Wednesday this year.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, old business.
No.
Mr. Charbonneau?
No.
Mr. Wilson?
No.
I don't have any. Any old business?
Just curious about how we're moving along with recycling, since Robert will be going back to his other work, I'm assuming, in March?
That is a Public Works operational piece, and we have some folks in mind who came on as seasonals.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other old business? Mr. Vashon?
No, thank you.
Laura, any old business?
No, thank you.
Okay. The next meeting will be February 28th, 2022, 6:30 PM. And also at that meeting, we will have the second public hearing on the fire truck. And with that, we need a motion for an executive session to discuss the evaluation of a public officer or employee, 1 VSA 313-3A3.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion that we enter into an executive session to discuss the evaluation of a public employee on VSA 313, section 2, subsection A3.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, made by Mr. Charbonneau, seconded by Mr. Vashon. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.